Poseidon, god of the seas. Poseidon, along with his brother Hades, and his sisters Hestia and Demeter and Hera, was swallowed at birth by his father Cronus. Then a sixth child, Zeus, who was never swallowed, and thus had never known humiliation, freed them. Poseidon sized things up. Zeus was a force to be reckoned with, that was the guy to follow. For 10 long years, the 6 brothers and sisters fought their father and aunts and uncles, the mighty Titans. It was a nasty war, but what war isn't? Poseidon gritted his teeth and did his part. He was no coward, after all. He donned armor and went dutifully into battle. He never lagged. But now and then there was a lull in the battle, perhaps because Zeus got distracted or because the Titans, despite their huge size, needed a rest. Who knew? No one ever explained things to Poseidon. Whatever the case, Poseidon was grateful, and in those moments he took refuge in visiting Pontus, the ancient god of all the waters, the partner to his grandmother Gaia, Mother Earth, and his grandfather Uranus, Father Heaven. He swam in Pontus waters, and, despite how badly his life had gone so far, despite all the time locked up in his father's belly, despite all the long years of savage war, he was happy. He found joy in the buoyancy of diving whales. He found beauteous rhythm in the undulating wake of eels. He found humor in the scuttling of crabs. Best of all, Poseidon found a friend in the oldest son of Pontus and Gaia. His name was Nereus, and he loved the watery depths as much as Poseidon did. Together they plunged to the corals and sponges that lived on the seabed. They rode on the backs of turtles. They flapped their arms like the rays they followed, then let them hang with their legs moving at the whim of the currents like the tentacles of the nearly transparent jellyfish. But then it was back to war, until a glorious moment when the 100-handed sons of Gaia joined the battle on Zeus' side, and then the Cyclopes gave Zeus the thunderbolt and Hades the helmet that made him invisible and Poseidon the trident. It worked, that trident. It worked splendidly. Poseidon struck it on the ground and the earth shook, boulders tumbled to the sea, rivers overflowed their banks. The Olympian gods won, and Zeus appointed Poseidon ruler of the seas. Poseidon knew his brother felt the seas were an inferior realm to rule. Again. Nothing could have pleased Poseidon more. With his black mane flying out behind him, he swam the seas in search of those who might need his help. It was a welcome antidote to the tedious war. And when he wasn't patrolling, he let himself be absorbed in the watery mysteries. That's when he discovered the finest mystery ever. She was the granddaughter of Pontus and Gaia, and the daughter of the lordly sea god Perseus and the lovely-cheeked sea goddess Cebo. That heritage made her the perfect wife in Poseidon's eyes. She was one of 3 sisters, called the Gorgons. The other 2 sisters were immortal, like the gods. But Medusa, as she was called, was mortal. Poseidon found her mortality that's much more alluring. She was vulnerable. How amazing to know someone vulnerable. He put his arms out and let the serpents of her hair swarm around them. Good. Those serpents could bite and poison. Good protection. He gingerly touched the wings that jutted from her shoulder blades. Good. Those wings could carry her far from an attacker. He stroked her scales. Very good indeed. They were harder than armor. And most assuring of all, she had a special power. Anything mortal that looked directly at her face would turn instantly to stone. That should do it. And so Poseidon felt almost safe in loving Medusa. They reveled together in his sea kingdom. At least for a while. Athena, goddess of wisdom. During the period when Cronus ruled the world, the Titans lived large, some on the land and some in the seas. The deepest oceans were the haunt of Oceanus, a Titan brimming with the need to spread his waters everywhere. His sister Tethys swam beside him, lithe, graceful, and white-haired. Not gray, she was not aged. Not silver, she was not a source of light. true white, pure as mother's milk. It was that white hair that had captured Oceanus. He took Tethys as his wife. Together they created so many sons, all strong rivers, from the great Nile of Egypt, to the famous Scamander of Troy, to the many that emptied into the friendly Black Sea. They swirled in eddies, they rippled with gusto, they rushed over cliffs and fell in loud, energetic sheets to the rocks below. Then Oceanus and Tethys created so many daughters, all water nymphs, some inhabiting pools and foothills, some splashing in springs, some slipping through swamps. Each nymph was unique, one rosy, one nimble, one soft-eyed, one knowing, all charming. When Zeus, the youngest son of Cronus, deposed his father and took his place on the throne as king of the universe, his eye fell on one of these nymphs, and he was indeed charmed. Metis, known as the Wise One, seemed to flow like water to Zeus, cool and soothing. Watching her was like swimming in a clear, bubbling spring. He was smitten. And since he was king and felt he deserved anything he wanted, he simply took her as his wife. Metis soon had a child growing within her. That's when Zeus' grandmother Gaia and grandfather Uranus gave him the ugly warning that, by now, he almost expected, Metis would bear him a daughter and then a son, and the son would be invincible. That splendid son, that wretched and hateful son, he would overcome his father. The curse felt never-ending. Uranus was overcome by his son Cronus, Cronus was overcome by his son Zeus, and now Zeus would be overcome by the son that Metis was fated to bear him. Zeus would have none of it. His grandfather Uranus had tried to prevent his overthrow by imprisoning his children inside their mother Gaia. A failed attempt. His father Cronus had tried to prevent his overthrow by imprisoning his children inside himself. Another failed attempt. Zeus was smarter than either of them. He opened his mouth wide and drank Metis, simply drank her, like a glass of the best sparkling water in the world. So long as she was trapped inside him, he could never make a son with her, so the prophecy was null and void. Zeus went on to take other wives, a long series of them. And all the while within him Metis sloshed around the growing babe, rocking her lovingly. And the baby experienced the world from inside her mother, inside her father. She sensed everything that either of them sensed. She grew wiser than both. Time passed and Zeus felt queasy, as though his stomach would burst. Then the pressure moved behind his eyes and nearly blinded him. His temples throbbed. His hair stood on end. And from his forehead sprang the goddess Athena, whole and solid and heavily armed. The gray-eyed girl looked around, completely alert and completely wise. She took her place among the Olympian gods and watched, with those gray eyes, ever ready for the chance to advise the belligerent, to strategize with warriors, to lead soldiers into battle. Hades, god of the underworld. One image had engraved itself in the mind of young, trapped Hades, the gaping hole of his father's mouth, the yellow of his teeth, the stench of his breath as the huge man swallowed him. From within his father's belly he punched now and then at the old man's liver. Remember us, he beat out with his fists, remember your evil act. When the young gods and goddesses finally spilled out amid the loud groans of their retching father, Hades scrambled to his feet and shook his fists at the rudeness of bright daylight. He'd grown accustomed to the dark, plus he was spitting mad. So roaring into war beside his siblings felt natural, like butter on a burn. It felt fat and rich and right. He fought like a madman against his father and the rest of the Titans. And when the Cyclopes joined the battle and presented gifts, Hades didn't hesitate. He jabbed a magic helmet on his head. He flew high, then bombed down like a falcon, straight for the back of Cronus' neck. He slashed and slashed, flaying the old man's flesh, always unseen, like in the old days inside the hateful one, but this time effectual. It was Hades who truly overcame the most blame-ridden father of the universe. Hades brought Cronus to his knees, Hades brought Cronus to justice. Wickedness deserves to crawl through the slime. When Zeus was about to hand out realms, Hades again didn't wait. He declared the underworld his. It was the land of darkness, and in all those years of war, Hades had never learned to like daylight. And it was the land of justice. It was where the ruling god sent those gods who fell out of favor with him, the wicked gods. Hades would deal with the wicked and show no mercy. He sat upon an anvil of bronze and fell from the surface of the earth for 9 days and 9 nights, until he landed in the underworld. He could have simply willed himself there, but it pleased him to experience the enormous distance. No one would bother him down here. He was absolute ruler. The underworld was huge. Had Hades wanted, he could have fallen another year before landing at the very bottom. But he didn't. The knowledge of its vastness was enough. He visited night, one of the earliest powers, draped over his walls, so nicely obscuring. He crossed over Styx, the cold river of hate, the oldest daughter of the Titan Oceanus, who had been given a glorious palace in Tartarus for siding with Zeus in the war against the Titans. He passed by Atlas, the dim-witted son of Iapetus, half-brother to the Titans. Atlas had sided with the Titans in the long war, so Zeus doomed them for eternity to bear on the nape of his neck and the girdle of his shoulders the entire weight of the heavens. He passed by the Hesperides, daughters of night, guarding a tree of golden apples. This was a fitting realm for him, indeed, especially since now and forever he could keep an eye on that scum of a father Cronus and make sure he never knew freedom again. With a satisfied sigh, Hades entered his stone palace and looked out on the ghostly and frigid fields, where colorless asphodel bent to a chilling wind. It felt strange to be so alone. He'd have to fix that. Soon,